The Owl and the Ribbon, a Kingdom Hearts fanfiction by Kessie-Louise. The time when she'd get her own travel wagon couldn't come soon enough. For now, it was her papa, her mama, and her all in the same wagon. It worked better when she was a baby, when she didn't know how to talk back and whine about how much everyone snored. It also made it hard to sneak out. And yet, like a weed, she managed. Sabrina was a traveler, a gypsy. Their particular caravan had a penchant for taking in stray children and making the best woodwork crafts you could get your hands on. Living as a traveler had its good and bad sides. One of the most consistent was how the caravan arranged itself once they had land to settle in. The heart of the camp was a large bonfire. Some cooking pots and barrels holding rainwater were left out most of the time. This was where everyone met for meals, and invariably for crafting too. At night they sang and danced around the roaring fire like spirits protecting a fairy circle. Their celebration of a day past lasted well into the night, only ending when the last instrument stopped playing. To the right of the bonfire were the wagons, pulled by a single draft horse who went untethered while the camp was established. The wagons were heavily decorated marvels in their own right. Hand-woven tapestries decorated the sides, indicating which family owned which wagon. Children over a certain age earned their own wagons, instead of sharing one with their parents like a nursery room. It was a large affair in which everyone in the caravan helped to work on. To the left of the bonfire was where they let the horses rest. Outside of the draft horses, the others were bred to be sold at the markets, or to motivated jockeys and fox hunters. Very few were kept for leisurely trots around the land Sabrina's people settled in. There were exceptions here and there, like the horse Sabrina wanted to seek out now, an Appaloosa named Killjoy. He was her horse, and she wanted to go for an unsupervised ride. The horses did not like their nighttime visitor. Several brayed in annoyance and stomped their feet to the ground. Sabrina didn't bother to silence them. Horses got spooked all the time. No one would bat an eyelash. Even in darkness, Sabrina found Killjoy. She tracked where his harness went. Then, with the dexterity of a thief, she undid the knot in record time. Leading the horse out of camp was going to be the hard part. The area that led away from camp was close to where the wagons were. She'd have to lead Killjoy past the wagons to even remotely be in the clear. Killjoy was a patient horse. He followed Sabrina's lead dutifully. His only moment of noise came when he whinnied right as they passed the wagon with Sabrina's guardians in it. Sabrina knew she had to act quickly. "Shush up, Killjoy, do you want us to get caught?" The horse's resounding bray sounded a lot like a yes to her. "Killjoy," she hissed under her breath, meaning it with every fiber of her body. She gave the horse a few gentle pats before leading him away again. Camp was barely in sight when she finally mounted Killjoy. With a crack, the horse was off into the unknown. For a moment, Sabrina was flying. The duo raced down the dirt pathway that would eventually lead to the village nearby. Noticing a gap in the trees that bordered the road, Sabrina made a quick decision, flicking Killjoy's reins to follow the forgotten path. The trees became thicker the further they went on. Sabrina saw it as a challenge. People have called Sabrina many things: a princess, a snake, a changeling, a trickster. There was always one part of her that tied those names together: determination. She was determined to go on a late-night ride today. She was determined that her horse could leave camp without waking everyone. She was determined that once her hair was properly mussed up from the wind, she would find her way home without issue. However, there were many things she never quite took into account. A spooked horse was about to be one of them. Sabrina had brought Killjoy down to a trot simply to admire the new place she had stumbled upon. The moon could be seen from the canopy of trees. She tilted her head as she tried to determine its current phase. Waning gibbous? That sounded about right. An owl call was heard from somewhere nearby, but the girl ignored it. Killjoy, on the other hand, did not. The horse let out a terrified whinny as he bucked upwards. Sabrina almost fell off. Instinct allowed her to keep to the saddle at least, but it didn't help much if Killjoy wasn't going to settle. "Whoa!" Sabrina tried to command the horse. "Whoa there, Killjoy. There's nothing there. Calm down." The horse ignored her. It continued to whinny and buck in distress. Sabrina held on as tight as she could, trying to pet the horse's mane to calm him down. Again. Whoa, Killjoy, she continued to repeat. It's all right, it's just us. Whoa, boy, whoa. It took longer than she wanted, but at least she didn't fall off. That's a boy, Sabrina approved, rubbing Killjoy some more. All better now. With the horse calmed down a bit more, Sabrina started to note a new sound. It sounded a lot like a cry of distress. The young girl tried to get a sense of where it was coming from as she tried to rein her horse in some more. Once Killjoy had been placated, Sabrina felt it safe enough to get off of him. She led the horse to a tree with a branch low enough for her to reach, but also sturdy enough to tie the lead to. Her knot was rather hasty in all respects. At the same moment, the cries of whatever was in distress were getting louder, almost making it hard to focus on anything else. Run away and I'll kill you, you hear me? She said to Killjoy, pointing a finger at the bridge of his nose. Killjoy sneezed. Yuck, she recoiled, quickly wiping her hand on her nightgown. Fairly certain Killjoy wasn't going anywhere, Sabrina went to explore. Her slippers made her cautious steps nearly silent as she tried to pin down where the noise was coming from. Her patience paid off. At the base of an old tree was a small snowy owl. The owl stopped its cries and realizing someone was there. Both bird and girl stared at each other in trance. That's not Aqua, was the first thing Ventus could think. Ventus was a familiar who had only recently gained the ability to transform into animals to better serve his master, a vampire called Aqua. It was a ritual that took almost a year to properly implement, if only because Ven's own excitement to be any creature he chose led to a lot of headfirst actions that only delayed things further. Tonight had been a moment of weakness. He had made 2 promises to himself. The first would be that he wouldn't transform without Aqua's permission, and the second being that he wouldn't leave his room should he do so anyway. Suffice to say, he failed on both accounts. His flight had started off so smoothly, too. The cool autumnal air brushing through his feathers, the ability to see the tiniest squirrel scurry on the forest floor as it prepared for winter. It was all so breathtaking. But his landings needed work. Like, a lot of work. His vision was far better as an owl, but adjusting to how far away something actually was still threw him off. Such as what had transpired not long ago. He had flown so long into the night that his wings were starting to bother him, and so he planned to land on a branch from an old tree in the forest. He dived head first, assuming he could stop himself just in time to give a little flutter down, but he misjudged where he was heading. Not only did he miss that branch entirely, he also crashed wing first onto the forest floor. Ventus had been calling out to Aqua. Being her familiar, she'd surely come to his aid, right? It seemed to take a bit too long. Ventus had gone on to grouchily think that Aqua was either letting him wallow in his poor choices, or she chose to walk at her own leisurely pace for about the same reason. And now all he could do was stare at this strange girl. He tilted his head in curiosity, and she unconsciously mirrored him. Weird. Was she the reason why Aqua wasn't here yet? Ven, are you alright? Ventus suddenly jolted at the call of his master. Aqua! Ventus called out, desperately flapping his wings. I'm hurt. I can't fly. Someone's here, so I can't transform back. Help me, help me! Sabrina backed up a bit from the owl's desperate attempts to fly again. Her first assumption about all this was that the owl had been kicked out of its nest, to which she really couldn't help it. But she noticed something about the owl's left wing. It couldn't raise it as high as the other. When the owl tried, it flinched. Oh, you're hurt, the girl deduced rather nonchalantly. Ventus immediately stopped his desperate flapping to glare at her. Ya think? He screeched at her in bird language. The girl didn't even bother to flinch. Hang on, she decided. I'll be back. Ventus watched with a scrutinized gaze as the girl went back to her horse. Now would be the perfect time for his master to come get him. Aqua! Aqua, where are you? Aqua! Instead of his master coming to save him, the girl returned with a ribbon in her hands. On her way, she even found a small branch that she picked up without much thought. Crouched down so she could be at better level with Ventus, the girl gave him a stern look. "I want to help," she told him. To further show that she wasn't going to be a danger, she offered her hand out to him. Ven looked at it, then to her. How could someone say words of caring while looking so peeved? Giving a sigh of defeat, Ven finally hopped a bit closer so he could allow her to stroke her finger against his head. She took the cue instantly. It was oddly gentle. Ventus didn't even notice that the girl had raised her other hand to also stroke down his wing. The sudden shock of pain when she grazed over the sore spot made him leap back in surprise. "I don't think it's broke," she said, more to herself than anyone in particular. "Keep your wing stretched out for me, okay? This might hurt a bit." The owl made a gesture that looked a lot like a nod. Sabrina absently nodded back, then went to work. Splints weren't too hard to make. However, most of her experience was with other humans and occasionally one of the racehorses. Having to navigate around feathers where she didn't know where they started or stopped made the process go a bit slower than she preferred, but it was efficient enough. "There," the girl decided as she took a step back to admire her handiwork. She bit her lip in thought before admitting, "It might be a bit too tight, but it should do until the fracture's healed, I think." Ventus looked at her, then down at his wing. He gave a small flap or two. It still hurt, and it certainly was on a bit too tight, but at least he could say it was secure. When he looked up again, the girl was gone. Just as the disappointment set in, horse hooves came into his sight. The owl looked up, and there was the girl on top of the horse. The girl reached into a sack attached to her horse and pulled out two objects, a knife and a single grape. Concentrating hard, the girl cut the grape into 4 equal pieces. She popped 2 in her mouth before carefully moving on the saddle to reach down to Ventus. "Here," she offered. "You might have to jump for it." So he did, but at least she was compassionate enough to give him the pieces one by one instead of just tossing them on the ground. She gave a small half smile as he finished the second grape piece. Knowing her job there was done, the girl directed her horse back home. Not long after, Ventus heard a voice he had been so desperate to hear not more than 10 minutes ago. "Ventus!" With a blink, Ven returned to his human form. The splint the girl had made had grown with him. He winced a bit at its oddness. Transforming so far had always felt a bit weird the first time or so after a complete change. This time was a bit different because of the injury. With a fracture, his bones had to rearrange themselves in accordance to the shifts and growths surrounding it. He sheepishly looked up at his master. There was a small sense of relief in seeing she was more concerned than angered. "You took too long," the boy then huffed. His master laughed. "You seem to be in good hands," she claimed. A pang of anger hit him in knowing that she had been observing the whole ordeal. "Let's go back home so we can nurse that fracture properly." "Wait!" Aqua paused. She raised an eyebrow to her familiar. It said more than words ever could. Ven felt himself shrink slightly. She'll be back, waiting for me," he tried to explain. In an even less sure voice, he added, "She'll need her ribbon back." Aqua continued to stare without discrimination. Closing her eyes, she took in a deep breath. Ventus understood this to mean one of 2 things. She was trying to trace a scent, or she was deciding on a big decision. It was rarely ever both. When Aqua opened her eyes, she looked at Ventus with all the calmness in the world. "We can leave it where she can find it," she gently told him. Aqua then held out her hand for him to take. "Come on." Ven couldn't help but fidget a bit. "Yes, ma'am," he agreed. He took Aqua's hand and the two started their way back to the castle. But Ven wasn't going to stop there. That ribbon was never leaving his sight until it went back to its owner. He wasn't sure if his master was aware of the plan formulating in his head, but she certainly didn't stop him from what came next. The townspeople despised the travelers by their second day of making camp. The whole lot took up at least 1 street's worth of merchandise in the market. The sounds of their proud late-night whooping and hollering could be heard from the village apartments. At least, that's what the people claimed. Ven could see their bonfire from the village, true, but he had to be pretty close to hear any kind of music, let alone whatever words were being sung. The travelers knew they could seem rowdy to others, and they planned for it. That didn't make it any less overwhelming while Ven reached their outskirts. Women danced around the fire with skirts as wide as their arms, allowing a fast enough twirl to make their skirts defy gravity. The instruments were incredibly varied as well. Bells and horns and accordions and drums and flutes and even a standing piano were used to give the people an excuse to practice their choreomania. The smells of meat stew and freshly baked breads took over the nose to bring the mind to a place of dreamy comfort. Walking on foot so far was Ven's biggest mistake. He could have drifted to sleep right here and now, but he had a mission. The young familiar puffed his chest up as he stepped forward into the traveler's camp. Entering the circle around the bonfire wasn't hard. His still small size made it trivial. Once he was inside, Ven froze. What could he do next? Just shout that he found a ribbon at the forest? Walk up to an adult that looked to be in charge and politely ask if they knew who the ribbon belonged to? Well, hello there, sweetie, a polite voice said from next to him. Are you lost? Ven jumped an inch to his life before turning to the voice. It was an older woman. Her gentle smile put Ven back at ease. She was a good mom. He could trust her for now. I found this ribbon in the woods, Ven told her, very quickly unwrapping the ribbon from his wrist. He had placed it there so he wouldn't lose it. It didn't look like anything we made in town, so I thought it might belong to your kind. Is that all? The woman gently laughed. She then brought 2 fingers to her lips and let out a shrill whistle. Inside the crowd, a man about as old as the woman stepped forward. This was the patriarch of the caravan. Once he was close enough, he gave Ventus a nod. Good evening, he greeted. How can we help you? With a blink, Ven quickly presented the ribbon to the patriarch. Somewhat bemused by the boy's shyness, the patriarch carefully took the ribbon from Ventus to inspect it. He was rather thorough in his inspection, unfurling the ribbon to see its length, running his hands along the stitching to feel just which stitch had been made. The patriarch definitely recognized it. He gave Ventus an odd look before turning his attention to the bonfire. In a voice that was stern but not angered, the patriarch shouted out, Sabrina! Ven's heart jumped as the girl from before came forward, completely unaware of the reprimanding she was about to get. She got rather close before realizing her caretaker was holding something. The moment she recognized the ribbon, her jaw dropped. Recognize this, princess? Her mouth quivered, but no words could come out. This boy found it in the woods, the patriarch then went on to tell her, finally bringing her attention to Ventus's presence. Her caretaker's face darkened as he added, Sabrina, we've told you not to ride on your own, especially when we're in a country you haven't been in yet. The girl flinched, then shot Ventus a venomous glare. Thanks a lot, that glare hissed at him. Now you got me in trouble. The patriarch turned his attention back to Ventus. Thank you for bringing this back to us, he said. Please stay for a meal or 2. Let it be our repayment for your kindness. The girl, Sabrina, gave a loud, disgusted scoff. She turned on her heel and all but stomped back to the wagons. Ven tried not to make it obvious that he was keeping watch on her, trying to move around the patriarch aside. No, thank you, sir, Ventus then said, remembering his manners. My mother will be wondering where I am. The patriarch raised a bemused eyebrow. So I see our princess isn't the only one around here who sneaks out at night. Ventus couldn't help but flinch. Seeing it made the patriarch laugh. I get it, he told Ventus. You kiddos need to explore. Just don't take too long to return home, alright? You're welcome back to our camp for as long as we're here. You can even bring your mother next time. Thanks, Ven shyly nodded. He turned to leave and soon started into a sprint. Sabrina, his mind kept repeating as he ran. Sabrina, Sabrina, Sabrina. Her name is Sabrina. I'll never forget her.